92 man-made islets scattered among the coral shoals of the Pacific Ocean. The walls here are built from enormous basalt columns, some weighing up to 40 tons, quarried from the opposite side of Pohnpei Island. Beneath this foundation, there is no solid ground, only living reefs and the ocean's depths. No blueprints or records have survived. Before us lies a city whose existence defies common sense. My acquaintance with this place began with the realization of a technical paradox. Madol, nestled on the eastern shores of Pohnpei, simply shouldn't have come into existence. It's a complex network of 92 artificial rectangular platforms crisscrossed by waterways. The island enclosures resemble giant log piles, but instead of logs, they are prismatic blocks of basalt. Some elements weigh 5 tons, others 20. According to measurements taken by German and American specialists, the weight of individual columns reaches 40 tons. The most astonishing aspect lies in the foundation. These colossal structures do not rest on bedrock. There is no natural support beneath them. This entire mass presses down on living coral. The scheme is simple and terrifying. Basalt, then a layer of coral, and below that, the abyss of the ocean floor. And on such a precarious foundation, an entire metropolis grew. Yet, the builders left no explanation for posterity. Why erect something so grand without bothering to compile even a brief guide? Let's take a closer look. Madol is not just an isolated sanctuary, but a meticulously planned urban structure. The archives of the Overseas Museum in Bremen house documents from German archaeologists whose research in Micronesia confirms the city was clearly zoned. There were residential sectors, quarters for the priesthood, tombs, and private residences for the nobility. The scale is astounding. Almost a third of a square mile of construction directly on the reefs. Experts from the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich estimate the total mass of stone used at 750,000 tons. Such a figure cannot be attributed to the whims of nature. Official myths, however, offer a different version. Local legends say that two magician brothers made the rocks fly through the air. A typical story. When sorcerers appear in chronicles instead of facts, it's a sure sign that the real construction methods are either forgotten or were never recorded. This is the main intrigue of our investigation. Wishing to understand who and how this city was created, we are forced to interrogate the stones themselves, as no written evidence exists. Let's try to understand the technical side of the issue. We'll start with the raw material. The basalt in Madol is special. It's a columnar rock, similar to the famous Giant's Causeway in Ireland. As lava cools, it forms almost perfect 5- or 6-sided prisms. These long, straight beams are ideal for laying. Outwardly, the walls resemble log cabins, which has led to the term log cabin style in scientific circles. It seems the material itself begs to be laid, but there's a nuance. A 13-foot column with a 3-foot diameter weighs as much as a loaded pickup truck. Further on, it gets more complicated. The quarries are not conveniently located nearby. Depending on the type of rock, they are found on the other side of Pohnpei. That's 15 miles as the crow flies across mountain ranges, impenetrable thickets, and then across reefs and open water. Researchers from the same University of Munich modeled various transportation methods: balsa rafts, double-hulled canoes, rope systems. On paper, this works for a single stone. But when the count is in the tens of thousands, logistics begin to strain at the seams. The scale of the problem is colossal. If moving one block requires 100 workers for a day, then the entire batch of 10,000 pieces would take 1,000,000 man-days. And that's just for transportation, without accounting for quarrying, the construction itself, and daily needs. For an island whose population at its peak barely exceeded 30,000 people, such a project was not just important, it became the life's work of many generations. Speaking of daily life, maintaining such an army of builders requires a logistical miracle. Pohnpei is a fertile land, but feeding thousands of people is not easy. Taro, breadfruit, and fish spoil quickly in the tropics. To keep workers on site, there had to be masterful management of harvesting, storage, and distribution. This implies a powerful administrative apparatus and an accounting system. But it is precisely here that we encounter a void. We see the result, the stones, but find no traces of those who facilitated this process, such as enormous kitchens. Let's return to the physics of the process, where everything becomes quite strange. Basalt is almost 3 times denser than water. It doesn't float. To keep a 40-ton block afloat, a raft capable of displacing 1,500 cubic feet of water is needed. Otherwise, the cargo would instantly sink. Moreover, the raft must maintain stability in the face of ocean surf and strong currents. German engineers confirmed, theoretically, this is possible, but in practice, it's work at the limit of human endurance, which had to be repeated for each individual stone. Just consider these numbers. We're not talking about a random boulder, but tens of thousands of elements for an entire archipelago of 92 islands on living coral. But the real trick is yet to come. The stones had to be placed with jeweler's precision. At the bottom, on the coral foundation, at the top, in the crown of the wall. Any miscalculation in balancing, and the first storm would have toppled the entire structure into the ocean. There's another detail that guides often forget. This isn't just a pile of stones. The columns are laid in an interlocking pattern. Each new layer is placed perpendicular to the previous one. This is how log cabins are built in America, with corners joined by interlocking joints. Only here, instead of wood, there are multi-ton monoliths. Such a bond perfectly distributes weight and allows the walls to withstand the furious blows of typhoons. This fact has been noted by many post-war researchers, and it can still be seen firsthand today. The architect of Madol was not just a strong guy who could haul heavy loads. He was an outstanding strategist and engineer. He understood the laws of statics and the resistance of materials. He knew that a city in the open ocean had to be flexible, able to breathe and resist the elements without crumbling to dust. And all of this was achieved without a single blueprint. Just imagine the scale of the planning. Who distributed the blocks? Who charted routes through the shallows? Who measured the depths so that the foundation wouldn't sink? How were the workers paid, and how were they motivated to work on construction for years? We have 5 fundamental questions, and there isn't a single clear answer in any source. We are literally facing a wall of silence. A single house on stilts is already a challenge. Madol is a grand urban planning project with canals and districts, and the civilization that created it left almost no evidence of the construction process. Here, the fairy tale ends, and the harsh facts begin. The Soutler dynasty, which ruled the island, has appeared in oral traditions for centuries. Lists of titles, land maps, and genealogies, carefully collected by anthropologists and stored in Bremen, have been preserved. But where are the construction records? Where are the lists of masters or the inventory of quarries? They simply don't exist. And it's not that they burned down like the Library of Alexandria. It seems they never existed in the form we are accustomed to. This is the semantic core of this video. Imagine 800,000 tons of basalt erected in the middle of an archipelago of 92 islands. This took the lives of many generations, yet the culture that created it left almost no documentary evidence. We are dealing not just with an archaeological find, but with a true engineering anomaly. Large-scale construction projects don't happen by themselves. They require strict organization. It's impossible to move 10,000 blocks without accounting, coordination, and a system. Even in the absence of writing, there must have been regulations. And since these regulations have vanished without a trace, we find ourselves in the role of a detective who sees a perfectly planned crime, but cannot find a single witness. The scenery is in place, but there's zero testimony. Someone might argue that oral traditions are sufficient. Let's assume so. But when a centuries-old tradition ultimately boils down to a legend about a pair of flying magicians, such an instruction manual raises questions. Researchers from the Max Planck Institute for Geoanthropology in Jena, who study the settlement of Oceania, confirm this in their scientific language. The material evidence of non-Madol is described in detail, but the principles of work organization remain a mystery. This is the root of the problem. I tried to imagine how one could transport so much stone to such desolate places without a single record. This might work in a small workshop, but not when building a city. Even if records were kept on bark or palm leaves, there should have been professional dynasties, teachers passing on experience to students, rituals setting the pace for construction. But there is critically little information about this, and this very silence is also an important fact. Let me clarify immediately. I am not trying to prove alien intervention. The point is simply that our sources are critically incomplete. And this gap in knowledge is not a reason to believe in mysticism, but a complex engineering problem that requires a solution. Now, about the reef itself. Geologists from Kiel University patiently explained an important thing to me. Living coral is not a monolithic slab. It breathes, breaks, and reacts to every storm. To build a city on it, two problems need to be solved: ensuring the foundation's load-bearing capacity and learning to adapt to the reef's vibrations. In practice, it looks like this. Non-Madol's foundation is often made of coral rubble and small stones. They act as a cushion, distributing the weight, and only on top of them lie massive basalt pillars. This is pure engineering, not magic. The designers understood that pure basalt would simply crush the living base. Therefore, the city was built in layers. Measurements confirmed that local light material was used in the deepest layers of the foundation, while imported heavy stone was mainly used for the outer walls. The people who built this way were top-notch professionals. But the most interesting thing isn't immediately apparent. A living reef is in constant motion. If you place colossal weight on it, the coral beneath it begins to grow differently. Marine geologists from Kiel found that under load, the reef compacts and becomes stronger, but only if the pressure is distributed evenly. A pinpoint impact breaks the coral, while a wide support stabilizes it. The builders of non-Madol, intuitively or through bitter experience, used precisely this principle: a wide base at the bottom and the main weight at the top. The layered masonry confirms this calculation. The first few feet are light rock for weight distribution. Above that are heavy columns. And at the very top, there's a relief again. The crown of the walls is often assembled from thin basalt rods. This was done not for beauty, but for statics. The center of gravity shifts downwards, and the island gains stability. And here the question arises: on whom did they practice? Such knowledge is not born in theory. Practice is needed. Mistakes are needed. Somewhere there must be ruins of islands that sank before the builders learned to do it right. But there are no traces of these failures. Non-Madol stands so confidently, as if it were the first and only project. This is either incredible luck, or we are dealing with a culture that has lost all its drafts. The main mystery remains unsolved. Who exactly was behind all this? The technical perfection of the object in no way correlates with the silence in the archives. A city of this level implies the existence of an administration, and an administration always leaves a trace. Nan Madol's material legacy is enormous, but its administrative legacy is negligible. Why? Here we enter the realm of uncomfortable questions. And this deserves respect, because we are faced with an object that has resisted the most aggressive environment on the planet for 7 centuries: salt, winds, tsunamis, and earthquakes. Scientific publications confirm that the load-bearing frame is still stable without any restoration. Those who made the calculations planned centuries ahead, and they were not mistaken. Compare this to our modern concrete boxes. We build for decades, and after 50 years, a building needs major repairs. There's no sorcery in Nan Madol's longevity, just a different kind of knowledge. It was precisely this knowledge that allowed the basalt to be perfectly placed on the living reef. It was probably such a natural part of the craft environment that it wasn't considered necessary to record it. Or perhaps the generational gap was so deep that the secrets simply couldn't be passed on in time. Now we are leaving the realm of hard facts. Where data ends, interpretations begin. There are 2 main versions, both discussed in the scientific community, and both have the same weakness. The first hypothesis. The Saudeleur dynasty built Nan Madol as a sacred center over several centuries. Construction was systematic. Knowledge was passed orally from master to apprentice, and the chain was broken in the 19th century after contact with Europeans. Genealogies of chiefs and archaeological data support this. The plus of this version is that it logically fits into the social model of Oceania. We know examples of mobilization of forces on Easter Island or in Tonga. The downside is that it doesn't explain the strange selectivity of memory. A people who remembered every boundary in their possessions somehow didn't preserve a single song or legend about the greatest construction in their history. They remember the genealogy of kings, but not how the city was built. This is a logical flaw that shatters the entire coherence of the theory. The second hypothesis. The Saudeleurs did not build the city from scratch, but arrived to find it already built. The main mass of basalt walls was erected in a much earlier era. The Saudeleurs merely completed and adapted the site to their needs. This explains why their legends lack technical details of construction. They themselves might not have known how this foundation was laid. This interpretation is good because it clarifies the reasons for the silence in the sources. In addition, it answers the question of why the decoration of individual basalt layers differs so much from later elements. On the other hand, this hypothesis has a weak point, a deficit of direct temporal markers. The results of radiocarbon analysis of organic matter from the lower horizons exist, but they are too few to confidently confirm the theory. Until the dating database expands, we are dealing only with a working hypothesis, not a proven fact. You've probably already noticed the general logic. Each version sheds light on only part of the puzzle, but none provides a panoramic overview. Both theories ultimately run into a lack of preserved evidence. It is at this dead end that global science is stuck today. In scholarly debates, there are plenty of nuances. Some try to combine approaches, assuming that the Saudeleurs merely completed an ancient core built by someone before them. Others are convinced that the entire construction took place under the Saudeleurs, but spanned many more generations than commonly thought. These opinions are worth listening to, but any attempt to patch one hole immediately creates another. By extending the construction period, you are forced to assume the existence of a super-stable authority for centuries, which only complicates the issue of record-keeping. And if you divide the construction into 2 stages, you will have to look for traces of a cultural fault, which scientists simply do not have at their disposal. It's a game where every correct move generates a new puzzle. Over the past decades, German specialists, from engineers to archaeologists, have done a colossal amount of work. They determined the origin of the basalt, studied the statics of the structures, and recorded all traces of destruction. Drilling the reef allowed them to literally reconstruct the chronology of the object's construction layer by layer. This is impeccable fieldwork, answering the question, what exactly is before us, and how does it hold up? But it is silent on the main point. Who conceived all this, and how was the process managed? Until there is an answer, we are left with an engineering and technical phenomenon. Perhaps tomorrow dating methods will become more precise. What if a manuscript is found in the archives of the Smithsonian Institution or in Pacific repositories that contains more than just legends about magician brothers? It's possible that new excavations will reveal tools that clearly link the construction to a specific century. There's a chance, but today we only have two theories, and each explains only half the truth. We are approaching the most important point. Non-Madol is not mysticism, but a tough challenge for engineers. How do you build a city of 800,000 tons of stone on a living reef without leaving any clear traces of construction management in the culture? Both options we are discussing leave this question unanswered. Therefore, there will be no final verdict at the end of this video. The conclusions are yours to make. So, you have two paths before you. The first, the civilization we know built the city over centuries, but information about the management of this process simply hasn't survived. The second, a much older foundation whose origin was forgotten even by those who came later, lies hidden beneath the solidar structures. Both ideas have merit, and both are powerless against the fact that the available documents are insufficient to reconstruct the work organization scheme. I won't impose the correct answer on you. Neither I nor anyone else knows it. Only one thing is obvious. The stones are in place, the calculations are correct, and the gap in knowledge hasn't disappeared. Think for yourself which scenario seems more convincing. Just remember that any of them requires explanations that we don't yet have.